Hi, I'm Shaylin Hayes from Misophonia International, and today I want to talk about a recent study that came out of Baylor College for Medicine. And I'm a bit upset about this study, and I've already started a petition on Misophonia International against this study. And this will be linked in the video if you would like to read more about it and sign this. Now, first, I want to start by talking about the actual study that I am upset by because I think it's important to provide context about this study. So I have it open here on my screen. And as you can see, it is under behavioral therapy. And the article is called Family Accommodation in Children and Adolescents with Misophonia. So, God, okay. It's a pre-proof of the study. And it's by Dr. Eric Storch and Andrew Guzik, as well as other authors. And it was accepted last month. Now, the abstract says that family accommodation, e.g., reassurance, modifying routines, assisting avoidance, has not been explored in youth with misophonia, but may have important clinical and intervention implications. We examined family accommodation in 102 children and adolescents with interview-confirmed misophonia and compared its frequency and content to family accommodation in 95 children and adolescents with anxiety disorders. And findings showed that family accommodation was ubiquitous in pediatric misophonia and may be even more frequent than in youth with anxiety disorders. Assisting the child participating in misophonia-related behaviors and modifying family routines were endorsed by more than 70% of parents of children with misophonia. And I'm just going to say, yeah, of course they are, because these children are struggling and they're suffering, and without accommodations, their quality of life is much lower. But anyways. Further, compared to parents of children with anxiety disorders, parents of children with misophonia more frequently reported child distress and anger when they did not accommodate. Yeah, because they're in fight flight. They are in distress. When you're not accommodating a person who is in fight flight, they're going to be in distress because their brain is attacking them. Okay, sorry. Where was I? Family accommodation was a moderate to strong predictor of misophonia severity, even when accounting for co-occurring internalizing and externalizing symptoms and demographic factors. This first study of family accommodation in pediatric misophonia suggests accommodation may be an important clinical feature and a potential candidate to target in interventions. So this target that they want to have is telling parents, oh, don't accommodate your children. That's what I got from that so far, but maybe I'm wrong. And this is just blah, blah, blah. What is misophonia? And, it's just saying what triggers people have and that they often have psychiatric comorbidities, which is true, but that doesn't mean misophonia is psychiatric. And family accommodation is characterized by the extent and manner that the family is helping people. And they are comparing it to OCD here, which is worrisome to me since misophonia is not OCD, but here we are, we're just confounding the two so that we can say that this conclusion has some validity. And then examining it was important. The causal link between accommodation and symptom maintenance has been well supported in literature. While not in samples of individuals with misophonia, studies in adults in OCD and in children with anxiety and OCD have found that family accommodation may mediate relation between symptom severity and functional impairment, although these results are based on cross-sectional results. So what I don't understand is why the hell we are even talking about OCD here. What does misophonia have to do with OCD? I personally have both. I have OCD, I have misophonia. OCD is a psychological disorder. If I kind of ignore the triggers, they still suck, but I can live with it. With misophonia, there is no amount of avoidance or ignoring or exposure that is going to make that better. I live with both on a regular basis. I can tell you from my own experience that this is not the same thing. And anybody who is a clinician should be able to do an OCD scale and do a misophonia scale and look at it and say, okay, these symptoms are different because the fight flight response in OCD will go down as you keep thinking about it because you'll come back to a baseline. With misophonia, it stays up, 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 doesn't go back down until you're away from the trigger and you get to a point where you freeze and you're pretty much so exhausted that you can't do something the next day. Now, anyways, it's talking about how the only study to date, and there's not much other evidence, blah, blah, blah. And the present study had 3 major aims. First, we sought to examine the incidence and extent of parent-reported accommodation and misophonia symptoms in children and adolescents. Given the high incidence of symptom accommodation and other related conditions, we predicted similarly high rates of accommodation, and we included a sample of youth with anxiety disorders for a comparison. Why are you comparing something that is likely neurophysiological with a psychological disorder? What do they have in common here? Like, you want to do preliminary research on misophonia? Okay, here's your preliminary research. What the hell does misophonia have to do with anxiety that should be put in a paper? Because I don't have an answer for that. Anyways, second, to inform treatment development, we examine the frequency of specific accommodation behaviors, such as modification of family routines, avoiding activities. So they're talking about avoidance here, which is particular to OCD, of course, because they're trying to make misophonia OCD clearly. And again, compared youth with misophonia to youth with anxiety disorders, whatever. No hypothesis was generated for this aim, as this is the first systematic examination of family accommodation in misophonia. Third, we examined whether accommodation was associated with misophonia symptom severity. And while accounting for co-occurring internalizing and externalizing symptoms in line with pediatric OCD, which is not misophonia, so whatever on that front. Also, why are you even doing this study? What benefit does this have to the community on whether or not children with misophonia are being accommodated? It would be fine if you had a positive spin and you were like, okay, you know, parents with misophonia are accommodating their children. That's great. They're actually accepting the disorder. There's less stigma. These are good things. But the bad thing is, when you were saying that more severe children have accommodations and therefore that's why they're severe, that makes no sense. The more severe children need more severe accommodations. Their disability is worse. I need glasses because I can't see. If I could see, I wouldn't have glasses. My accommodation has to be stronger than someone who is only a little bit blind and maybe needs, you know, glasses just to read. I need them all the time because I'm completely blind. Should you take my glasses away and then my eyes will start to see? No, because that's not how it works. Anyway, so the participants is what really makes me upset too, because blah, 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 there were 211 between 8 to 17. And then they talked about how many weren't assessed, how many didn't end up in the study. Yeah. So I just want to find the part that really got to me. They're just talking about their scales. Sorry, I'm just looking at this and it's just talking about all the people who were in the misophonia group. Now there was something about 53%. I can't find it. But anyway, I believe that some of the people with misophonia also had comorbid disorders. But I'm always blind when I'm looking at the methods section because it just hurts my eyes. All right, so when we get down, we're talking about how they were compensated for their time. And I wonder if these families, when they were reached out to or they saw an ad for a study on misophonia and making their lives better. I wonder if these families knew that their very personal experiences were going to be used to parent blame and mom shame these mothers for helping their children. I just wonder that. And I wonder how they feel. And if you were in this study and you want to reach out, I would love to talk to you because I honestly am worried that these people feel badly. And I'm just worried that these poor people were taken advantage of by thinking that they were going to have a good study come out of this that would be helpful for their lives, instead of essentially telling them that their concerns aren't valid. So we're in the results section now, and parents of youth with anxiety disorders reported significantly more reassurance than those of misophonia. Conversely, parents of youth with misophonia reported higher scores and more weekly accommodation for participating in behaviors related to the child's difficulty, assisting the child in avoiding things that might make him her exhibit symptoms, avoiding activities, and the need for modifying family routines. And obviously, if these kids are struggling, then why wouldn't they be getting accommodations? If your kid is getting triggered by sounds and they're showing obvious signs of distress, I think the natural thing would be to help them. Okay, here we are. I found it. Here's the real clincher. 51.5% of the children and adolescents with misophonia also met criteria for one or more anxiety disorders. So you're not even looking at misophonia people versus anxiety people. You're looking at misophonia comorbid versus anxiety. So what the hell does that tell us? Nothing. And besides, who knows what that disorder was? Maybe they have extreme panic. And then how do you know whether or not things are being made worse because of the misophonia? Okay. So the discussion is kind of long about all these results, but I'm going to read it because I think it's important to know what's being said. And the discussion is always the bulk of a research paper where they really tell you what they think. So this study is the first to examine family accommodation in youth with misophonia. Rates of accommodation were significantly higher in misophonic youth relative to youth with anxiety disorders overall. Well, no, they weren't, considering you're comparing anxiety people to anxiety people, since these people, only half of them even had misophonia. So a quarter of the people in this study had misophonia alone without co-occurring. So that's 1/4. That doesn't tell us very much. So rates of accommodation were significantly higher in misophonic youth relative to those youth, blah, blah, blah. And in specific, oh God, this is hard to read because and in several specific behaviors, including participating in behaviors related to the child's difficulties, assisting the child in avoiding things that might make him or her exhibit symptoms, avoiding activities, and modifying family routines, families with misophonic youth were significantly more likely to accommodate in at least 3 different ways per week compared to anxiety disorder controls. Well, yeah, their kids are tortured by sounds. They want to help them. There were increased instances of accommodating relative to anxious youth by providing additional items to help the distressed child. Oh, what? Are they giving them earplugs and headphones so that they don't hear the bad sounds and can actually live their life? Oh no, these terrible moms. Terrible, terrible mothers. How dare they? Parents of children with misophonia were also more likely than parents of anxious children to report their child becoming distressed or angry when the parent did not provide assistance. Yeah, because an anxiety child can eventually calm down. A person with misophonia cannot, so they're just going to get more upset and more upset. That, duh. Okay. These data suggest that the impact of misophonia has on family functioning and may reflect efforts of family members to support or foster adaptive living of the affected child, especially in younger children, for whom accommodation rates were highest. Accommodation, however, may have problematic secondary consequences by limiting engagement in important life activities, reinforcing problematic and maladaptive behavioral responses to stressors, and lowered ability to regulate emotions. We're calling triggers now a maladaptive and problematic behavior. Like, yeah, no, your child can't hit someone when they're triggered, blah, blah, blah. And the response to stressors and a lower ability to regulate emotions is why they need accommodations. These accommodations are used to lower their sensory input and response based on decades, like 50 plus years of research from sensory regulation that the brain and body are connected. Regulating emotions can happen through accommodations, through proprioceptive input, exercise. Avoidance is good because you can actually participate in things you wouldn't otherwise. If you have earplugs in and then you can be able to sleep next to someone or eat at a dinner, that is helping you in those situations. The avoidance is when it gets so bad that you just need to sit alone. How is that wrong? How is that wrong to recognize that you are at your limit of emotions and need some time apart? Me as an adult, I know my limit, I can advocate for myself, but children can't. And that's why this study really upsets me because a child going to a guidance counselor at a school who has a guidance counselor who read this study might say, well, I heard that accommodating it will make it worse. So your child has to sit in class and listen to people chew gum all day. Okay, so then the child fails because they can't actually listen to the teacher and they can't participate. Is that better for their life if they're failing school because of their disability? Or is this an unfair human rights issue? I'm leaving that for debate. And here we go again by talking about family accommodation is a key target in psychological therapy for OCD and anxiety. Good for them. Good for OCD and anxiety. What in the hell does that have to do with misophonia? Nothing that I can tell. So the frequency and impact of accommodation in pediatric misophonia indicated in the study suggest it could be similarly critical in psychological treatment development for youth misophonia. Well, first of all, misophonia is not a psychological disorder. So I don't know why you want to do this treatment so bad. Maybe they're just hard up and need more people to come to their practice. For example, reducing avoidance of triggers and provision of tangible items are likely important clinical targets, given their reinforcing nature. Reinforcing what? There is nothing in the world that's going to reinforce a trigger for me for not. Either there's a sound or there's no sound. I'm triggered or there's no trigger. You're literally in fight flight. I'm not thinking about this. I think about this after the response. So anyway, encouraging misophonic youth to align their values with actions may be one method of reducing avoidance. What values? Is there value to be tortured? Similarly, helping parents develop methods of verbally supporting adaptive actions or tangibly reward systems supporting their child besides taking on responsibilities for providing assistance items or modifying routines may be useful. I guess none of that makes sense. Like giving someone a reward if they don't wear headphones for misophonia. You could offer me $1 million. If someone's whistling in my ear, I don't care about the money. I care about the fact that my fight flight is up here. I'm shaking. I'm feeling a physical presence in my body. It hurts. I feel completely disoriented. No amount of reward is going to take that away. It's not a behavior. I'm not behaving. I'm reacting to a fight flight response in my body. So anyway, so after all of that just stupidity, It is important to note that our findings suggest that the specific targets and treatment may differ somewhat between misophonic versus anxious youth. Yeah, no duh. They're different people. Reducing the degree to which family support avoidance modify routines or assist with daily activities may be particularly salient for misophonia's youth, whereas reassurance seeking may be salient target for anxious youth. Okay, here's the thing. You show me a kid whose parent accommodates them and one whose parent doesn't accommodate them, the accommodated kid is probably doing way better because they're loved, supported, and actually get time to regain their sanity between triggers. The one whose parent doesn't care and forces them into the situation is just going to be triggered all the time and have buildup of sensory stimuli. So, yeah, if they actually maybe talk to people, they would understand that. And again, consistent with OCD, can we stop talking about OCD? And then, yeah, there's several limitations. The sample was predominantly Caucasian and the caregiver were primarily the mother. So moms are bad. Moms should not help their children. And the study was cross-sectional, which precludes directional inferences. And there's a lack of a cutoff point on the scale. And yeah, this is just, given the nature of this work, no statistical correction was used. It's basically a paper that looked at kids with accommodations, said, hey, these kids have accommodations and they have bad misophonia, and then decided that the accommodations were bad, not that the accommodations were there because the kids were suffering and they needed them, which is disturbing and weird. So I just don't understand where they're going with this. I just want to, where was it? Yeah, there was one part up here that I didn't read, and it said, when the parent did not provide assistance significantly more frequently than parents, or no, it was right above, sorry. And for the 4 FAS items, assessing distress and consequences, non-paramedic group comparisons indicated that parents of children with misophonia experienced that their child became distressed or angry and abusive when the parent did not provide assistance. So now we're saying that these kids that are triggered are abusing their parents. So I wonder how all the moms feel there when they're being told that their kid is abusing them because they are in distress. That must be awesome to hear. And yeah, this is where they completely just decide that their research meant something. Within these limitations, the study has several implications. First, the importance of considering family accommodation when assessing youth with misophonia is highlighted given the frequency of occurrence and its clear association with severity. Indeed, specific familial behaviors may be maintaining maladaptive behavior patterns. Okay, but it's not a behavioral disorder. So yeah, they're maladaptive. What? Since when are headphones or going to the bathroom to take a break maladaptive? That is adaptive. That is engaging your fight flight in a way that works for you instead of it taking over your life. Anyways, future research should focus on optimal ways of engaging parents of youth and examine whether reducing accommodation results in improvement and impairment. So you want to torture study people for a study. Great. That sounds awesome. How is that different from exposure therapy? When you want to take away these poor children's accommodations, the things that are making their life easier, you want to, for scientific reasons of whatever the hell, take away these helpful things for a child just to see if your stupid study means anything in the real world. Why are they doing this? What is the goal? All research should be ethical, and ethical research should start with a parental consideration, with a consideration for the family as a whole and how it impacts the sufferer. I don't know who asked for this study or who wants it. Who wants to know if wearing headphones is bad when it helps so many people? I highly, highly doubt they're bad. And at this point, there is no hope for a good treatment. None of it has worked. So telling people that the only things helping them are now bad simply because you want to write studies seeing if misophonia is like OCD is ridiculous to me, because these accommodations are the only thing that people have right now. It gives people hope. It gives people control over their life, where you can wear headphones and then go out in public somewhere that would have been torture before. gives children earplugs in class so that they can actually sit and pay attention and make better grades so that the triggers in the back aren't as bad, giving them a desk to a corner so that they can feel safe and secure. In what world are these harming people? And if they were showing to harm the child and not making them better, don't you think the parents are smart enough to stop doing something if it was causing more distress? No, it's causing less distress. And if exposure worked and ignoring the trigger worked, we would all be cured because there are triggers everywhere. So I encourage anyone who agrees with me on this study to sign the petition that's linked and leave a reason. We are publishing anonymously some responses. You can choose whether or not you want to. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to hold researchers accountable to what they're researching, to what goes out there in the world, and ask them why they are using grant money to essentially just write things that muddy the waters and tell people not to help themselves. Because I personally think that there's no good reason for this study. A study should improve the lives of those being studied. And comparing misophonia to OCD and reassurance taking when all we are doing is avoiding things that are harming us is disturbing to me. And I truly think that this study should have never been published. So I hope you have a good day, and I hope that this explanation helped.